thank you, Mr. Speaker. And in many ways, I disagree with the motivation that's been brought forward with respect to this piece of legislation. The member herself even made reference to the fact of what's happening from public opinions in regards to immigration in general. Is there any surprise that the Conservatives like to feed that perception, Mr. Speaker? And we see that with a number of actions and statements that they actually make. You know, even when I posed the question, she responded to my question by saying I laughed, that the Liberal Party laughed. That's just not true, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, that is just not true. And if at the end of the day, they take a look, and I would suggest that they look in terms of what happened. I did not laugh, Mr. Speaker. I take the issue very seriously. What I see across the way is a Conservative Party that does not take the issue of judicial independence very seriously, nor do they have any concept of what it is in terms of policy, good, sound public policy that's in the best interest of Canadians and permanent residents. What they like to do is to take the extremes and then exacerbate on those, Mr. Speaker, to the degree in which they feed anti-immigrant feelings in our country. And I say shame on them. I think it does a very strong disservice to Canadians in general. Think in terms of a permanent resident. Number one, you can have a permanent resident living in Canada for 40 years. Do you know permanent residents are actually family members of many members of a family, some of which do have citizenship? Let me give you an example of one file that I had that was not that long ago. Imagine a father married with a number of children. I believe he had 3, it could have been 4, might even been 5. It was at least 3 children, Mr. Speaker. They were all citizens, but he was not, Mr. Speaker. For a number of reasons, he was not. He was a permanent resident. And yes, there was an incident that involved drugs. And at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, I believe that well, you know, it's really shameful in terms of the allegations that are being thrown across the way about buying sex and sexual violence, attributing that to the individual that I'm talking about. Shame on you. Shame on you. Understand the system before you start leveling the type of allegations that you have. You know, for in their mind, you know, they need to be a little bit more understanding in terms of what happens in our communities. There are things such as individuals making a bad decision. And sometimes, Mr. Speaker, it does not necessarily justify a deportation. In some cases, it does not justify it. That there could be extenuating circumstances that do need to be taken into consideration. Yet they stand back and they say nothing. Where's that caring attitude for real people that are not committing the type of crimes that have made reference by the introducer of this particular legislation? At the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, the types of crimes that are being suggested, they're going to be deported anyway. If someone is going out there and raping another individual, do you really believe that they're going to get special treatment from a judge that goes before a court? I don't think it's nowhere near to the degree in which the Conservative Party is trying to put on the record. And I would suggest to you it does 2 things. Number one is it shows and clearly demonstrates that they do not have respect for judicial independence, Mr. Speaker. They don't respect judicial discretion. They talk about the rule for law, but take a look at the legislation that they have brought before the House. Legislation that questions consistently judicial independence and their ability to be able to have judicial discretion. Consistently. They bring in legislation that is not charter-proof, Mr. Speaker. They're prepared to walk on the rights of Canadians, and I would even suggest to you permanent residents. Not everyone gets a Canadian citizenship and has been here for 40 years. And they don't for a number of different reasons, Mr. Speaker. And it affects all communities. So if you stand up and you're going to a multicultural event, tell them to their face, why don't you, in terms of your feelings, that because you're here for 30 years, you should not be treated like a Canadian, Mr. Speaker. Shame on the Conservative Party. We live in a multicultural society, and there are good reasons why constituents in which they represent do not have a Canadian citizenship. There's well over 1 million plus. I would suggest to you it's probably over 2 million people that live in Canada that have been here for years and years and years, and they do not have a Canadian citizenship. And at times there might be some of them that fall on the other side of the law, Mr. Speaker, and it doesn't necessarily mean that they are bad people and have to be deported, Mr. Speaker. In certain situations, yes. But the difference is, Mr. Speaker, is that we believe in judicial independence. We understand the necessity of having discretion for our judges, Mr. Speaker. They need to, they were talking about immigration numbers. She made reference that the high immigration numbers. Let me remind the Conservatives. I was actually in the opposition when Stephen Harper back in 2014 said we want to increase the number of temporary students and instructors to over 400,000 in terms of temporary permits. And guess what, by 2022, that was a Stephen Harper commitment. And then following that, you had a pandemic. There's a reason why we have the situation that we have today. And yes, Mr. Speaker, there is responsibility on all of us, on all sides, to try to do what we can to stabilize our immigration, temporary visas, and so forth. But to consistently, we hear from Conservatives that downplay the importance of immigration. They have a lack of respect for permanent residents, Mr. Speaker, and we've seen a good example of that today. I would suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that the Conservatives need to stop thinking about their far-right movement that's within their caucus and start thinking in terms of what's in the best interest of Canadians, Mr. Speaker. This is legislation, as you can tell, I won't be supporting. I do not see the merits for it. I think it's a betrayal of judicial independence. I believe it's a betrayal of judicial or allowing judges to have discretion. They have not demonstrated at all that the judges as a whole have not used a proper discretion. They have not demonstrated that. Yes, there could be individual cases that are out there, and I have not heard the great details on those cases, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you that many of the types of cases that you hear today are the same types of cases that would have been there when Stephen Harper was the Prime Minister and the leader of the Conservative Party sat around the Conservative caucus. But at that time, they didn't do a thing, Mr. Speaker. Why? Because they today are so far to the right, they want to appeal and say things that is ultimately, I would suggest to you, as being anti-immigrant, Mr. Speaker. And that is the reality. That is the type of things that we're seeing from the Conservative Party as they make that shift even further and further to the right. No wonder why Joe Clark said that he didn't leave the Conservatives, the Conservative Party left them, Mr. Speaker. That's the reason why we have Kim Campbell feeling so uncomfortable with today's Conservative Party, Mr. Speaker. Is there any wonder why, at the end of the day, the Conservative Party needs to start seriously doing some internal review? And I hope, we'll wait and see what happens to their leader of the Conservative Party. I suspect he might get a few bumps, but at the end of the day, I suspect he'll survive because the majority of the caucus is far to the right, based on the types of things in which we've been hearing in terms of, well, we don't want the government to invest into social programs. There is no role for the government of Canada to build on social programs, whether it's health care, pharmacare, dental care, food for children, child care programs, supporting our seniors. Why? Because the far right in the Conservative Party does not like government, Mr. Speaker. And that's the type of thing that we're seeing more and more of coming from the Conservative Party of today inside the House of Commons. And albeit you know, good luck. I hope you're in opposition for many, many more years to come, Mr. Speaker. I would hope that common sense will prevail and this legislation will not even make it.
Order, order, and I'll remind the member not to address comments directly across the floor, but through the chair.